Good afternoon. My name is Berak Hussain. I'm the International Student Counselor at the Health and Counseling Services at Carleton University. Welcome to the third and final part of our series, Empowering Your Self-Esteem. The last few weeks, we have been on this beautiful journey of exploring our self-esteem, learning about different concepts, learning how to build the different building blocks in order to stabilize our self-esteem in a very healthy and balanced way. First, we took a look at building our core worth and looking at, again, different concepts of what self-esteem is all about. And learning how to separate our worth from external factors, essentially understanding that as human beings, our worth is endless and that our worth is dependent on our internal rather than external factors of what others think about us and the whole world around us. And so we built our core sense self, factor one, or the first building block of balancing the self-esteem. Last week, we took a look at love. And what we did with that is we took a look at how to find love from within, healing the inner child, giving love to that inner child that perhaps did not receive the love it needed as a child growing up from parents, family, and other important people in the child's development. And looking at different strategies, how we shift our mentality from going from a negative place of self-hate and dislike to a more positive way of liking ourselves. We cultivated body image and looking at ourselves in a very different way, realizing that we are magnificently created. Today, we shall be continuing with developing our self-esteem through the third building block of growth, which is developed once we have a sturdy base of both love and core worth. And so we'll jump into that today, and let's take a look at, quickly review what we did take a look at before. And just give me a moment here. So I see here, there we go. So last week, like we said, we took a look at the basics of unconditional love, finding love and healing our core self, looking at the language of love, how we see ourselves, the opinions of others, acknowledging and accepting positive qualities. We definitely looked at how to cultivate that body appreciation rather, and asserting self-love and looking at ourselves through the eyes of loving meditation, liking the face in the mirror. And we did this wonderful meditation at the end, which reinforcing and strengthening our body appreciation. So today, we're going to be taking a look at the active side of love, which is all about the action, rather love in action, right? And it is completing it. Now, those of you who are watching right now, good afternoon, welcome. It's going to be interactive in the sense that I'll be asking questions along the way for you to reflect on. If you are comfortable sharing as well, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Just want to make sure that the sound is okay, both on Facebook as well as on YouTube, just to make sure the sound is good. All right, so it's all good and going. So let's get started again. And if there's any issues, just let me know. So like we said, when we take a look at in terms of what growing, the basics of growing is, it is in fact love in action. And what that means and alludes to, it takes a look at coming to flower, so to speak, right? Looking at how we become even more of ourselves as we are growing. And as we go through this section, of course, then we'll get into a little bit more deeper in terms of understanding what that actually means, because it is a concept that's hard to fully appreciate when they just seem like empty words, right? So in other words, when we take a look at growth, right, it is developing our capabilities and our potentials, ascending and moving towards excellence, our greatest potential, right? Elevating humanity, both for others and ourselves, of course, right? So in other words, it's the calm feeling of being even more of what you are at the core and developing the traits that exist in the embryo. And if you remember, that's how we started talking about the core as the embryo, the innocent and unaffected by the world. So this is where we feel deeply and we are quietly glad to be who we are, right? Because you know that you are being the best person that you can be, and at the reasonable and steady pace that is uniquely suited to you. And that's what, when we take a look at growth, what it means in that sense. So if we take a look here in terms of what that means when we actively put it into action, so to speak, it's about putting love in actions in terms of the next steps of what that could mean. So again, I'm using the book called The Self-Esteem Workbook by Glenn Schiraldi. And I highly recommend, for those of you who have been following this series or who just jumped in today, to actually get this book. You can write in it, you can reflect, and it's an investment in developing yourself. You can take a look at it later on as well, right? So here we initially have likened the core, like we said, self to a crystal of the infinite unchanging worth, right? With every needed attribute in that embryo to develop. So factor one, which is the first building block of human worth, accurately sees this, right? And factor two, love, the second building block, strengthens and shines the core. And that provides the foundation for our growth, right? So growing or completing involves scrubbing off the remaining dirt and lifting that core into the light where it may shine even brightly. So if we take a look here in terms of the next steps of love in action, let's take a look at this in terms of looking at choosing behaviors that are loving and self-promoting. So what does that mean exactly, right? What we want to take a look at here is being consciously aware of choosing behaviors that are loving, right? So we remove around the core behaviors that are not loving because they are not self-promoting. Self-promoting here is not meant in an arrogant or conceited way, but rather, again, bringing that core into the light. That's what it means here. So these include practices that are unhealthy or unkind, right? So for example, drug use, excessive anger, unloving behavior that includes sleeping too little, right? Eating too much food, perhaps inhaling too much nicotine. So personal growth in this case is one of life's greatest pleasures. And to repeat again, the idea self-esteem does not mean complacency. Rather, what it means, I find that it's sometimes misleading. The idea that self-acceptance at the end is therapeutic or personal development rather than from the beginning, right? So we see that counseling or the therapeutic process, which as a therapist I'm going to encourage, right? This can in this way become less concerned with assisting people towards change, but more concerned with simply helping them to be more comfortable, right? And that might be an adequate approach for helping someone who perhaps can come to the term of having perhaps a terminal illness, right? Because it is unlikely to succeed as well in aiding the process of personal growth and development. So self-esteem in essence here with the growth, the realistic appreciation, opinion of oneself, and it rests on the combination of self-acceptance from building block 1 and 2 and coming to flower and in growth. You see here, we all are familiar with Dennis the Menace, the cartoon character that we grew up with. And I love this depiction here of this cartoon, which is very reinforcing of our growth, right? Which is the best thing you can do is get very good at being you. That is a very powerful statement that I think we can all strive towards when it comes to practicing the conscious choosing of behaviors, right? And promoting and self-promoting and removal of core behaviors that are unhealthy and unkind to yourself. Which brings us now to taking a look at perspectives on growing, right? So let's take a look at this factor here in terms of what the healthy growing process is. And it rests on the following 10 principles, okay? So I'm going to go through and I'd like you to reflect on them. I'm going to turn on some really nice sound in the background while I'm doing this reflection. And that way you can get into the Zen mode. So tell me if the sound is good, all right? So number 1, we are designed, created to develop physically, mentally, socially, emotionally, and spiritually. And we'll do so when our capacities are nourished and exercised. What is this nourishment? What we learned last time, love. Developing our capacities is a way of loving ourselves. Sharing them is a way of loving others. Growing is an outgrowth, right, of unconditional worth and unconditional love, not a condition for these. So love provides the soil for growth, and in the absence of unconditional worth and love, success, performance, producing rarely lead to self-esteem. Therefore, the decision to develop is best preceded again by the unconditional worth and unconditional love. Number 4, growing does not mean a high degree of competence, since research indicates that competence does not predict global self-esteem. Competence, as it usually is used, implies an outcome, so accomplished, finished, perfected. Rather, growing is a perception that says, I can, right? I am capable and I have ability. I am on track and moving in a desired direction. So growing is a direction and a process, not necessarily an outcome. Therefore, one can feel good about progress even when one falls short of a desired goal, right? Perfection, for example, as long as you're doing your best to doing your best, reaching that goal, that process in itself is where you feel good about yourself. Number 5, developing our capabilities does not change, increase, or prove worth, because worth exists at birth, right? It is already infinite and unchanging, like we've said. Rather, as we grow, we express our worth, change our perceptions of self, experience ourselves with more joy, appreciation, and satisfaction. We see our true core selves more clearly, and we put in the sunlight where the core self shines more brightly. Now, number 6, over time, good experiences with a friend, of course, solidify our trust and favorable opinions with that friend. So similarly, good experiences with the self fix and enhance that self-appreciation. Number 7, growing is an ongoing process, rather, right? And unlike the rose, like we said, which blooms and then dies with the help of others or nature, right? The core self can continue to grow even as the outer shell ages. That's a pretty deep concept right there. Growth is not completed in isolation, but it is accomplished independently. So with people around us, family, friends, the help of others, nature, grace, God, all of that. Number 9, growing consists simply of cultivating integrity. So moral conduct and character, which we spoke about before, and wholesome pleasure. So pleasure that recreates without compromising conscious, including art, beauty, hobbies, learning, developing talents, serving, cleaning, and beautifying our surroundings, playing, working, loving, etc. And finally, number 10, people choose to develop in order that they can be happier. As we are happier, we tend to enjoy life and ourselves even more. And so these are 10 reflections on the process of growing. Let's move on to the next part now. So let's take a look at these questions here when it comes to looking at challenging ourselves when it comes to the integrity, okay? So let's take a closer look here in terms of what it means, like integrity, okay, and pleasure, and how are they incompatible or are they not? And we just brought it up earlier. So let's take a look at that. Are they incompatible? So integrity implies, like we said, an integration or a wholeness. So it implies that there's no division between one's behavior and one's value. They're all on the same plane. So as we develop integrity, we experience ourselves with more peace. We can say, as what Winslow Homer says, all is lovely outside my home and inside my house and myself. So moral behavior becomes, it gives us that serenity. It is kind. It is peace, right? It is honest. So integrity is developed by starting the day with the decision of, today I will put integrity first. Although some have argued that pleasure is somehow incompatible with integrity, recall, for example, there's the canonized Catholic saint by the name of Francis of Assisi, who said that no man can live without delight. And that is why a man deprived of joy or spirit, or the joie de vivre, right? The joy of living, goes into carnal pleasures. So this is an interesting perspective. You deprive yourself, then you're going to go the extreme. So Gandhi further explained this, that it is not pleasure that corrupts the consciousness, but pleasure without conscious, right? So pleasures that exploit, that abuse, or violate trust. Wholesome pleasure, like we described earlier, is recreative and it is necessary. And only the pleasures that degrade the human consciousness are to be avoided. So, in this sense, the pursuit of wholesome pleasure is consistent with the pursuit of integrity, right? So, they are compatible when it is wholesome pleasure. Number two, to have self-esteem, must I have perfect integrity? So, inner peace requires that one is doing the best that one knows how. One can do no more than one knows how or is capable of. So since everyone is fallible, right? And some cultures and religions believe that there are people who are infallible, but the fallible people, right? Each person falls short of perfection. However, we can still experience our worth if we try our best to be on course and to be in the moving direction of that the goal that we want, right? So that's how you align it with self-esteem, having that integrity, not necessarily perfection, but on the goal of working towards that perfection. And finally, when is growing not fun, right? Because it is a grueling process. It's not necessarily fun all the time, right? Especially when you have to face truths about yourselves and others that may throw you off guard to what your understanding of yourself and the universe and God and the world is, right? So when is it not fun? It's not fun when the outcome becomes a dire necessity, right? So, if, for example, one must develop into a successful salesperson as a condition of worth or happiness, then one will likely not feel driven or joy, right? Again, so we return to the fact that wholesome growing assumes that unconditional worth and love are first in place so that one can enjoy the process of growing without fear of failure or preoccupation with the outcome. Outcome preoccupation, on the other hand, and fear of failure, both derive from the same roots, which is conditional worth and conditional love. This is where we have to work with the unconditionality, right? So growing is climbing that staircase process, not arriving. And then one can enjoy the progress and the direction without frustration for failing to arrive at that perfection, because perfection is not our goal, right? Our goal is the process of going up the stairs. So let's take a look, now that we have this understanding, the core base of growth, let's take a look at reflections on elevating humanity. I'm going to read some really interesting reflections here. And of course, we should have our sound back again for this part here. So an anonymous quote says, once you have a self, which is you are secure in your own worth, then it is easier to lose yourself in selfless service. That's a really powerful, powerful statement. Another one here by Albert Einstein says, one knows from daily life that one exists for others. 100 times each day I remind myself. That's a pretty powerful one. This is not denying the self, of course, but when it's almost like that altruistic thinking of others that motivates you, right? George Burns says, if all else fails, try doing something nice for someone who doesn't expect it. You'll be surprised how good you will feel. Another anonymous one says, as we see what we can do, we more likely will appreciate who we are. This is talking about our competence in getting to it. And finally, another anonymous one. Some say principles are constraining. I say they are liberating. Some say service is subservience, but I say it is enabling or ennobling, from being noble. These are pretty beautiful statements when it takes a look at how we elevate ourselves as humanity. And as we elevate through the service and caring of others, we then elevate ourselves beautifully as well. Let's go on to the next section now, where we are taking a look at strategies for growth. And we're going to go through each one of these. And I'd like you to grab a pencil and paper or just jot it down in your notes in your phone in terms of taking a look at some really great strategies that can help us get to it. So we're going to take a look at accepting that we're not perfect. We're going to take a stock of our character with this basic model. And we've got a chart that you can take a look at after. We're going to look at how to experience pleasure. Remember, wholesome pleasure, and looking at how to schedule that. And we're going to look at how to prepare for setbacks. All right. So we've got our Carlton mug here. Get your mug of chai or tea or whatever you like. And we'll get started on this section. All right. So number one, we're going to take a look at accepting that we are not perfect. And this is a very interesting concept when we're taking a look at this, because it can be pretty challenging sometimes, especially for the perfectionists. And I see a lot of students sometimes and people within the community who project and give off that impression that they have to be perfect, they are perfect, when in reality, we all have flaws and weaknesses, right? So growing, again, when we take a look at that in this perspective, is like climbing a mountain. If you know you have a firm footing, then you push up and with confidence, and it's fun, right? It's a challenge. Building block number one and building block number two, worth and love, these are the firm footings of our growth, like we said. And as you set out to grow and to enjoy this process, some people might rain on your parade, if you've heard that expression, by reminding you in one way or another that, you know what, you and your efforts are less than perfect. So let's take a look at this exercise. This is another nevertheless exercise that we've had from when we took a look at it earlier on in growth and love. So this is the one for growth. We're going to take a look at here how it varies from the other two. So even though, so we want to say even though, and then you're going to put a statement of growth. So I am not perfect, for example, right? Nevertheless, how would we fill that next? Nevertheless, I am still learning. Nevertheless, I am trying to enjoy this, right? So I am growing. So other nevertheless statements could be, even though I am sure trying, or rather, I'm learning. Another one could be, I think I can improve. I still enjoying this. I can still try enjoying this, learning towards that perfection. I'm on the course and moving along. Learning is still adventurous. I'm more today than I was yesterday. I can still persist. I can still get it done. What are some thoughts that you have? Can you think of other statements? So even though I'm not perfect, nevertheless, what could be a statement of growth that you can put? I'm having fun, perhaps? What could be a good statement? This is where we want to make this interactive and fun for all of us, right? So what would be a good statement that we could put for a statement of growth? So I've given a few. I'm still at work. I think I can improve. A really good one is, my worth is infinite. I appreciate my efforts and I have as much right to try as anybody. What would be a good one that you could think of? Anybody out there have got an idea? I still accept myself. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Absolutely. See, that acceptance right there is when you put that, helps you on that path of growth. And it's very powerful. The more you have these types of statements, the more powerful that you become in strengthening yourself, right? So this is something that you can practice with a partner, with a friend, and you can continue doing this to develop that. And so what we want to do, the takeaway of this exercise, right, is with the nevertheless, is learning how to accept your imperfections. So let's take a look at this. So for the next 6 days or so, select 3 events that have potential to erode your self-esteem. Okay. So I want you to think of something that can erode your self-esteem for the next few days. All right. And so what you want to do when you have an event section, a statement that you use in the effect, what you want to do is in the event situation section, you write down the statement of, even though I'm not perfect, and the nevertheless statement, and then describe the event, right? The statement that you used and the emotional effect that you experienced from selecting the statement of, even though I'm not perfect, nevertheless, I'm having fun, I'm still learning, I'm still good, et cetera, et cetera. And you keep saying that to yourself. Okay. Keep a written record of this to reinforce the skill. So accepting your imperfections exercise, think of something that would normally erode your self-esteem, and then put the nevertheless statement to it. Even though I'm not perfect, nevertheless, whatever statement, keep that statement as a mantra, so to speak, that you will continuously use to help you improve and accept your imperfections in a way that is empowering, that is humble, and that it helps you grow, and that you don't feel stuck, right? You don't feel stuck in feeling low about yourself, but rather you are growing. So if we go on to the next section here, we're taking a look at stock of our character, rather, way, and taking a look at assessing different areas of our living. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this here. And this is also a pack of information that we're going to go through, but we got this. We got this. So when we take a look at this part here, what we are doing is we're taking a look at how we are not judging ourselves when we take stock of our character, right? We can take inventory of our strength and our weaknesses with love and honesty. Psychologist Arnold Lazarus has this really great assessment in the different areas for our patterns and strengthening our weaknesses, right? So this here, it can take a look at looking at ourselves in terms of, you could say, a non-judgmental view, right? And when we take a look at this, it helps us looking at our non-judgmental view in terms of these 8 sections here, right? And so this is in terms of our behavior, the things that we do, our affect. So this refers to experiencing our feelings, sensations, which has to do with our 5 senses, of course, imagery in terms of visualization, cognitions in terms of, like we said, nevertheless type of things, or challenges that indicate distortions, right? The moral, which has to do with character, conduct, and our interpersonal and our conduct, rather. And sorry, number 7 is the interpersonal in terms of our quality of our relationships. And number 8 is the drugs and the biology, which refers to our present health habits. So there is this model that we're going to go through, which is called it's an inventory called the basic mid pattern, again, by psychologist Arnold Lazarus. So this is a multimodal approach of helping, right? And it helps people have their strengths and weaknesses in these 8 dimensions, looking at them in their lives and representing by a different letter. So B for basic, A is for affect, S for sensations, imagery for I, C for cognitions, and M for moral, I for interpersonal, and D for the drugs, right? And so these 8 here help us look at our strengths and weaknesses side by side, helps put our weaknesses into perspective, right? Therefore, we see weaknesses as rough edges that can be strengthened rather than something that can drag us down, right? And so we're going to take a look at this in terms of how we can build ourselves using this model. So let's take a look at the chart here that we have. Now that we have a good understanding of ourselves and what that looks like with that chart, let's take a look at that chart now. So using the basic mid, all right, we've got this model here in terms of, and bear with me as I go through it here, okay? Because it is a bit of, and if you want this, you can email me and I'll be more than happy, or message me and I can send it to you later on. But right now, just keep it mentally and you can jot down notes. So we're going to be doing this loving, fearless, searching, and honest moral inventory. That's what this exercise is called. It's written there, but it's very tiny. And so what this really does, it helps us list our strengths, right? So if you look under each of these categories, so we've got them all across, the basic, mid, all across. And under each of the 8 areas, okay, in this planning sheet, we're going to list our present strengths, or what is presently going well in our lives, okay? So the question that poses here, so right at the top, you see what it says, present strengths. So you jot down your present strengths. The second question you see halfway in the chart says, what are the present problems in your life? What do you notice that dissatisfies you? So describe these under the present weakness for each of these. So behavior, affect, sensations, etc., etc. So you can do this mentally in your mind, or you can watch this after and do it slowly, or you can get the book and do it on your own. Number 4, so as you review the present weak areas in your life, let me ask you this question. How would your life be different if you were to develop these areas? So describe your life in each of the 8 areas. For example, if I were less anxious, right, with affect and sensations, what would I hear or see differently? How would my relationships be different? Right. So that's a really great, reasonable talk back to that question of how you can challenge those so-called weaknesses, right? To kind of smoothing them around the edges. Number 4, so under each of these basic mid areas, indicate what you would like to change or grow. Notice that the possibilities suggested are to reinforce our strengths and to develop areas that are presently weaker. So this can require your best creative thinking. And so for each weak area, there are many, many ways to develop. So we know that a weak muscle can be strengthened by a variety of different exercises. So, for example, to improve health habits, one could do what? You could read about it, you could join a health club, hire a nutritionalist or a trainer, initiate a walking program, or anything like that, right? So, to reduce symptoms of anxiety, one could learn breathing techniques, right? Breathing control and muscle tension relaxation techniques, or seeking assistance through a therapist or a mental health professional, right? Excessive anger, for example, that could be reduced by uprooting distortions, restoring your self-esteem, applying healing skills, and or learning to forgive, right? And many steps towards growth and development can be accomplished by yourself. So recognizing when help is needed and finding that help, that is a huge and healthy sign of self-esteem. So some interesting realizations arise when you work through this exercise. For example, is alcoholism a moral problem or is it a biological, right? So it is not if one views it as an addiction and refuses to judge the core of the addicted individual. It is you that consider the behavior, right, adversely affects the family of the individual and the person themselves. So do you then place alcoholism under drugs or biology or under the moral, right? So the author says, Dr. Glenn Schiraldi says that this is not a critical, if it's not critically affecting your life for good or bad, because there can be overlap, right? There can be a lot of overlap in these different areas and sections. So it is not critical in which area a category you put the strength or the weakness. What matters is that they are acknowledged. And when you acknowledge and you're validating it, you're giving it its importance and value. And then that you refuse to judge or condemn. That is the core, because you know that you are not perfect, right? So you want to take your time going through this type of exercise. You might, think about it and then work on it. And then you can work on it over the next few days to develop it a little bit further. And you can look at this weekly, perhaps, or monthly, or every few months to see where you're at growing the certain weaknesses that you want to grow on. And of course, we know that growth is not an overnight process. You may feel disappointed. Let's say it's almost like when you are on a diet or a physical training program, you're not losing weight as fast as you want. Well, the same thing, it's a process. It's an overall process. Same thing with growth, right? So returning to the self as a portrait analogy, that is also important, because then it helps us think that, classic painting takes years to complete. It's not something that can be done overnight. And we are a portrait in the making, so to speak, right? And it's never finished, perhaps, the portrait, because it is an evolution of an ongoing, continuous process. Any comments or questions so far? Yeah, the print is very small. So I would ask if you could message me after, either through Facebook or YouTube or email, then I'll be more than happy to send you a copy of that. But make sure that you do pop me a message afterwards, because I can't send it in the middle of the program. We'll do that after. So let's take a look now at the next part in terms of another strategy here, experiencing pleasure. This is a really, really interesting concept, because it can be seen as quite selfish, perhaps, in some angles, right? So if we take a look at understanding something really interesting from a study that took place back between the 1970s and the 1990s, it had to do with the average American work year, where it increased by more than 160 hours, and leisure time dropped in corresponding fashion. So this, despite improvements in technology, there was still that higher workload. So people tend to give up activities that give them pleasure. And we know that's the first thing that goes is exercise and free time when you have exams and midterms around the corner, right? And time is of the essence here. So as a result, what happens is the stress and the absence of pleasure, the moods of people slipped in the study, right? And the more depressed people became, the more their self-esteem eroded, and the less likely they are to believe and formally enjoy, like the formally enjoyable activities that will bring them pleasure. So they fail to engage in the satisfying activities that would lift their mood and rebuild their self-esteem. So in the absence of leisure time, it becomes more difficult to define yourself apart from your job or paycheck. Harvard economist Juliet Score reported that when workers at a British factory were forced to give up overtime because of hard times, a physical and emotional recuperation took place. So, with time on their hands, including weekends and holidays, relationships developed and the meaning of life became clearer again. So, the idea of money lost apparently some of its intensity. And even those with families to look after, they preferred this new type of arrangement. So this is quite interesting when you think about that. So let's advance the proposition here that finding pleasure in life is a skill that adults need to learn. And it's really good if young adults and even children can learn this early on, because as adults, we're going to have to relearn or reinforce this, right? So this skill maintains emotional balance and it improves self-esteem, as studies have shown, by helping us experience ourselves in a variety of pleasant ways. So there's no suggestion here that one cannot or should not find pleasure in work, only that in the present culture that we're in, there's a tendency for work to be narrowly defined to an individual. So it's very personal. I, for one, love the work that I do and find much pleasure in it sometimes, despite the fact that it can be very challenging when you're dealing with people who are dealing with mental health disorders and trauma and so on and so forth. So this is not what we're looking at here. We're looking at pleasure outside of our work, right? So let's take a look at this next activity here, which helps you discover or rediscover what is pleasant for you. And we want you to make a plan for yourself. So again, on a piece of paper, write out what we're going to chat about here. Okay. So the first part, we're going to take a look at how to actually schedule pleasant activities. And this is an interesting study, or rather an activity and tool that is done by Peter Lewinson and his colleagues. And what they do is they first put out a list of social interactions that could be fun. So what I want you to do is, as you hear something, jot down, rate it from 1 to 10, from the least pleasurable, pleasant, to 1 to the most enjoyable. And we're going to rate it there. And then later we're going to check out or pick the top 5 that would be the most interesting for us. Okay. So I'm just going to go through a few here. So when it comes to social interactions, okay, it's about events that are being around with other people. So they tend to make us feel more accepted, appreciated, liked, or understood. And you might feel that an activity belongs to another group. That's okay. We can switch it around to different activities. It doesn't necessarily have to be to the social one. Okay, so tick off, rate it 1 to 10 when you hear these things. So being with happy people, being with friends and relatives, thinking about people I like, planning on activity with people I care for, meeting someone new of the opposite gender or the same gender, going to a restaurant or a new club or a gathering, being at celebrations, so birthdays, weddings, parties, family gatherings, get-togethers, or holy events, depending on religious background. Those tend to give us that pleasure as well. Meeting a friend for lunch or coffee, talking openly and honestly about what's interesting to you, expressing true affection, showing interest in others, noticing success and strengths in family and people around you, courting, so getting to know someone for a relationship, having a lively conversation, inviting friends over, stopping to visit friends, calling up somebody you enjoy speaking with, apologizing, smiling at people, calmly talking over problems with people that you live with, giving compliments, back pats, praise, teasing, bantering, amusing people or making them laugh, playing with children. So if rate those, I know I went through them pretty quickly, but think about, 1 to 10, how much I enjoy these. So the second part, we're going to take a look at activities that make you feel capable, loving, useful, strong, or adequate. Again, as you hear them, just rate it out of 10. So starting at challenging job or doing it, learning something new, helping someone, contributing to religious, charitable, or other groups, driving skillfully, expressing yourself clearly, repairing something, solving a problem or a puzzle, exercising, thinking, going to a meeting, visiting the ill, homebound, or the troubled, telling a child a story, writing a card, note, or a letter, improving your appearance. So whether it's medical help or dental help, improving your diet, et cetera, or getting your hair changed, planning or budgeting time, discussing political issues, doing volunteer work, community service, planning a budget, protesting injustice, protecting someone, stopping fraud or abuse, being honest, morality, correcting mistakes, or organizing a party. So out of 10, see each one of these, where would you put them? Finally, intrinsically pleasant activities, laughing, relaxing, having peace and quiet, having a good meal, listening to good music, seeing a beautiful scenery, going to bed early, wearing comfortable clothes, wearing attractive clothes, going to a concert or an event or a play, taking trips or vacations, doing artwork, going to a sports event, taking a drive, sitting in the sun, watching the sunrise, watching the sunset, boating, pleasing my family, friends, or employer, watching TV, camping, taking a bike ride, hike, or walking, being with animals, taking a nap, listening to nature, getting or giving a back rub, watching a storm or the clouds in the sky, having spare time, daydreaming, smelling a flower, talking out old times or special interests, traveling, and going to auctions or garage sales. I can pleasantly say that I enjoy most of these activities, that's for sure. All right. So now that we've spoken about social interactions, and then we took a look at activities that make you feel capable or loving, and finally, intrinsically pleasant activities, most of them, you're going to probably rate them pretty high, right? Next, what we want to do is place a check in each of these. And of course, anybody who's interested, I could send you this information where you can get it. But over the last 30 days, how many put check marks mentally in your mind of some of these activities that you've done over the last 30 days, right? Then select the events that you probably would do on a good day, right? So then you want to compare, all right, how many times you've actually, or how many items you've enjoyed in the past that you are currently not doing very often, right? So which ones you've done in the last 30 days, and circle the ones that you would do on a good day. And then think about which of these activities that I have done before that I haven't done in a while. So using this idea of the pleasant event scheduling, all right, make a list of 25 activities you feel that you're going to enjoy doing the most. And then you're going to make a plan to do more of these pleasant activities. Start with the most simplest ones, like sitting in the sun, perhaps, to organizing a party, and the ones that you're most likely to enjoy. And do as many pleasant events as you reasonably can. It is suggested that you start with one each day, perhaps more on the weekends. Write your plan on a calendar and carry out this written plan for at least 2 weeks. Each time you do an activity, okay, rate it from 1 to 10. So 1, least pleasurable, high, 10, highly enjoyable. And this tests the stress-induced distortion that nothing is enjoyable, because, we say, oh, I don't enjoy these activities anymore. This will show you that perhaps that there are. So this rating may also help you later replace less enjoyable activities with more enjoyable ones. So I just want to note here that if you are dealing with depression, right, it is common to find that your old favorite activities are now the most difficult to enjoy, particularly if you tried them before when you were very low and you failed to enjoy them. So this is common. This is normal to the person who is dealing, let's say, with a mental health disorder like depression. So you might say something like this: I can't even enjoy my favorite activity. And so this could make you feel more depressed. So these events will become more pleasant again as the depression lifts. I want you to be aware of that. So for now, we want to start either with very simple small activities to build that up, and you try your old favorites till as your mood lifts. So something to be cognizantly aware of, so that you know you are doing your best to do the best that you can when you are dealing with depression, right? So finally, let's take a look at some tips and things that make life worth living. So number one, some tips about pleasure. So tune into the physical world, right? Pay less attention to your thoughts. Feel the wind, feel the sunlight. Or when you're washing your hands with soap, feel the soaps as you wash, right? Or when you wash the car, see and hear. So this is a really great way of being mindful, of being present in the moment. So before doing each event, especially the ones that we mentioned, set yourself up to enjoy it mentally. So identify 3 things that you are going to enjoy about it, and you say it. So for example, I will enjoy the breeze. I will enjoy the sunshine. I will enjoy talking with my younger brother. Relax and imagine yourself enjoying each aspect of the event as you repeat each statement, right? And then you ask yourself, what will I do to make this activity enjoyable? And if you are concerned that you might not enjoy some activity that you'd like to try, break it up into steps, right? So think small so that you can be satisfied in reaching your goal. So for example, start by only cleaning the house, like for 10 minutes, right? Start your timer for 5 minutes, go do it. After 5 minutes, you can continue. This is, by the way, what we call the 5-minute rule to motivating and getting started. But start for 5-10 minutes, then stop cleaning your house. Reward yourself with a good job. My goal was to do it for 10 minutes. I did it for 10 minutes. Then you can come back later and continue if you feel like going. So check your schedule for balance. This balance is crucial. So can you spread out the things that I need to do to make room for the things I want to do? Need to versus want to. So check your schedule for that balance again. Can you spread out that? And we know that time is limited. So we want to use that time wisely. So you don't need to do activities you don't like just because they're convenient, right? You want to do something that really lifts you up. So let's take a look at the second part in terms of little things that make life worth living. So I'm going to read a few things here, and just close your eyes as again, we'll have the sound in the background as we describe these. The smell of burning leaves in autumn, right? And by the way, you can write some of these down and then see which ones really stand out for yourself that you want to do. Automatic ice makers, pizza delivered to your door, a hot shower when you're freezing. The service department saying no problems, that's on warranty. Terry cloth bathrobes. I like fleece bathrobes. Those are nice and fuzzy, warm. Room service, that combined smell of pneumo grass in the summer and popcorn that hits you when you walk into the movie theater or the baseball stadium. Those 2 weeks in spring when even the drabbiest shrubs are in full technicolor. I love that time, that favorite time of the spring when the green grass just starts coming through. That vibrant green is just gorgeous. Having nothing scheduled, for example, Sunday morning, except that nice coffee and brunch and watching your favorite cartoons, perhaps. A parking space 4 steps from the restaurant door. The zoo on a sunny day. Heated pools, those are amazing. Geese flying overhead shaped in the perfect V. How satisfying is that when you see that, especially in a beautiful sunset? The airline ticket clerk explaining that they sold too many coach tickets and you will be bumped into first class. Hey, why not? I love the window seats. For me, that I get that feeling every time I get that window seat. A cool breeze on a hot day. Your suitcase being the first one to appear at the airport passage carousel. So these are things to remind you that there are beautiful, many things in life to enjoy, right? There's many of life's loveliness. And you will probably also enjoy these more when you actually give it that appreciation, right? When giving it that attention. When you do that, then you're more likely to look at things in that different perspective. So which one of these stood out for you? I know there's quite a few here. Which one of these stood out for you when we were going through that list? I particularly, as you saw how I was describing some of them, the plane one is a big one for me. I really that. It's really nice when you are in a service and then the service comes back quick, right? For example, a car wash, getting your tires done quickly. I find that when it gets done quickly, it's really great. Or coming back from the dentist, they say no cavities, right? So these are really great to kind of get the mood going. All right, so let's take a look here in terms of being realistic about what it means to prepare for setbacks. Because although we're talking about growth here and we're talking about all the pleasure in life and things to look forward to, let's take a look at the realistic aspect of preparing for setbacks. So now you've acquired a substantial set of skills from the core worth section, love, and now the growth section of self-esteem. So regardless of how secure one's self-esteem is, there's still that possibility that it can be blown away by a salient failure or an unfortunate event. So it's imperative to develop skill for writing out failures. So for keeping self-esteem strong and secure during these inevitable storms, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? So in some ways, let's take a look at this activity, which is a review. So let's first pre-assess. So what are the things at which people, including yourself, fail at? What are the things that we fail at? All right. Could be our jobs, tests, marriages, parenting, school, reaching that ideal weight, smoking, keeping moral standards, making time for fun, reaching goals, right? So these are things that perhaps that we fail at, which are normal, right? But let's take a look at, what does failure actually mean, right? What does failure mean, right? It could be perhaps that nobody loves you, right? Sometimes people have these answers, right? Is it a rejection? You're saying things like, I'm no good, not maintaining my self-esteem, I'm human, right? Failure means that perhaps. Or, what has worked? We take a look at what has worked to help you cope with this failure during, before, and after. And this is a key approach right here. So we want to take a look at what has helped you, right? What has helped you work through that? So sometimes people mention that talking it over, right? Giving oneself permission to fail, forgiving yourself, realizing that it won't matter too much 5-10 years from now, changing our course, right? And as you're getting the idea here that sometimes people vary in how they view failure, because failure to you could be different for me, right? And in their abilities to cope with it. So again, failure is like approaching that perfection, from getting something done, getting done perfectly. And we want to constantly be aware that, it's that process, right? It's progression. It's not all or nothing. This type of all or nothing thinking can really, really impact us and hurt us, right? Because perfection means what? Completed, finished, without defect or flaw. And so since humans are fallible, like we say, we can only approach perfection. We can't attain it. So a goal or a success refers to attaining something that we want in order to reach that happiness, comfort, or our growth. So because humans are always in the process of becoming, actualizing, a goal is placed somewhat to the left of our perfection, right? So you've got perfection and then you've got the goals before perfection. So you might argue that you could get or set a goal, right, of your income and meet that goal perfectly, even then but aside from simply quantifiable endeavors, goals are generally imperfectly met, right? So this is in terms of imperfections, sorry, rather improvements could idly be made no matter how well we perform. So our improvements can be made no matter what our performance is. So perfection in this case means making more nearly perfect. So this can occur as we attempt to reach our goal, right? Or after we meet a goal. So people imprecisely say, I'm a failure, which means I always am and in every way fail. And it's a strong statement, and it really can put you down. It's self-defeating when we mean to say, I failed to reach my goal, not I'm a failure. I failed to reach my goal. So you notice here you're also externalizing, because you're not internalizing by calling yourself a failure, but rather putting it on the goal. So I fell short of my goal. I made a mistake, etc. So you see here how we can reframe the idea of reaching perfection to reaching a goal, because as the statement says, there is a big difference between failure
and defeat. Failure is when you are defeated and never learn nor contribute to anything. And we are always on that path of learning. Even when we don't attain our goals, we are still learning. So let's take a look at the next part in terms of how do we handle flops in our setbacks, right? So rather than using the label failure, let's use the word flop. So this is a nice reframe of using words and this is referring to unfortunate events or behaviors, falling short, mistakes, etc., etc. Flop sounds like serious, right? It's much less serious and it's much less permanent than failure. And it refers to an external, right, of ourselves, not the core. So one more concept is worth reiterating before we go on to the skill building activity of this is through this research that is demonstrated that pessimistic feelings or thinking styles rather held by men in their 20s predicted poor physical health when those men reached their 40s and 50s. This is a study that was done by Peterson, Seligman, and Valiant in 1988. So the idea here is that when an unfortunate event occurred, the pessimistic men tended to fully fault themselves, right? And they believed that they would never improve, and they believed that their misfortune would spill over into all areas of their lives. So, for example, after failing a math test, a pessimist would think, it's me, I'm the failure, right? I'm horrible at math. I always mess up math tests. I'm just unlucky when things really matter. So what would an optimist say in this case? On the other hand, who fared much better years later in their physical health, they might think, I wasn't up to par, I wasn't up to that day physically. It was one thing, it's one thing at a time. I'm not going to let that get to me, right? This is not going to ruin my life. So you see, those who had that positive mindset, it helped them later on in life, but also it's because they use these types of statements. So similar thinking styles tend to distinguish drug addicts who relapse after slipping from those who rebounded from similar setbacks. So from such a research, we can then form certain guidelines to handling the setbacks that we have in our lives, including changing the word failure to flop. So number one, admit mistakes. Don't deny responsibility, but focus on remedial action. What do you need to do? Number two, reframe the event instead of condemning the core self, right? Which erodes our self-esteem and saps motivation and energy, focus on the external. So for example, instead of thinking, what is wrong with me, right? The answer is easy. We are imperfect, right? Focus on externals. For example, fatigue, incomplete preparation, too little experience, not enough sleep, etc., which contributed to not reaching your goal of doing well in your math test. So instead of considering something a total failure, remind yourself that there will probably be other opportunities. And after experiencing that flop, you ask yourself the following questions. Did certain things go well? What are the advantages of not getting what I wanted? What coping skills could I have learned from this? What were there signs of an impending crisis that I did not heed? If a similar event occurs, what could I do to attend to such signs earlier? So being proactive rather than reactive. Okay, so this is how we handle flops. So let's take a look at this flop inoculation exercise. Okay, so we're going to jump right into this, and again, jot down some notes or in your phone as well. So guidelines such as what we have here, these can be really, really helpful, right? Let's put them into practice. So this exercise derives from stress inoculation developed by psychologist Donald Meichenbaum in 1985. So he states that people can prepare for stress by practicing what they will think and do before, during, and after and encountering a stressful event. So exposure to small and safe doses of imaginary stress can inoculate us, just as a small injection can inoculate us against diseases. So here, the stressful event is the prospect of flopping. We know we're going to flop, right? So for example, failing short of a goal, making a mistake, performing poorly, or forgetting to use your self-esteem skills when you are criticized, right? So step number one, we want to put a mental check mark beside these statements that I'm going to read off to you that would have meaning for you if chosen as part of your coping repertoire relative to making mistakes. Okay, So I'm going to read before, during, and after. So you can just write down before, during, after, and then mentally put a check mark beside some of these. It will be fun to succeed, but not in the end of the work if I don't. I am new at this, so I'll be a little extra careful until I get the hang of it. I'll approach this with curiosity, not fear or self doubt. I'll aim to do a good job. I won't ruin the experience with perfectionism. That's a really powerful one there. I'm embarking without absolute certainty of all the facts and outcomes, and that's okay. I have the right to decide what's best for me and to implement my decisions with confidence and without apology. If I'm not uptight about mistakes, I'll also be more creative. I'm optimistic rather, and I'm open to all possibilities. What will this challenge require of me? What can I realistically give? It could be fun to try and stretch in the process. I'm not afraid to risk and fall short because my worth comes from within. What's the worst that could happen? So these are the things that you could check off mentally before these mistakes or setbacks, okay? Now, during, this is difficult. Relax and focus on the task. Take it step by step. Feel good about the successes. Relax and enjoy the process, glitches and all. My quest to transcend and shape these imperfections is important. I'll take it one step at a time. Remember humor. It reminds me I am neither as great as I wish I were, nor as bad as a lot of people might think. I am not a deity. I am human. It's okay to be imperfect. I will do my best. This informs me about my present limitation. So these are statements that we could put in our mind during a setback. And then afterwards, I had a weakness. That was then, this is now. I'm just a beginner at this, and beginners have to expect mistakes now and then. This isn't a signpost to the rest of my life. I am hopeful. I take responsibility for understanding the situation and not necessarily taking the blame and never condemning myself. My judgment and behavior were bad, but I am not bad. This revealed a weakness. This is part of me, not all of me. The weak parts are rough edges. At the core, I am worthwhile. I love myself for this. I am still here for myself, to be a friend through this period. I have the courage to love myself when I am imperfect. This is my foundation of growth. I think we need a bit of sound with this, don't we? There we go, much better. I'll change my course so I can be happier. I can use experiences from the past and convert them for strengths. I have the right to correct my course. I am adequate to learn from this and improve next time. These are statements that we say again after an unfortunate event or something that makes us feel like a failure. So we frame it to flop, and then we work on saying these statements. Also, okay, I messed that up. It's the first time. Sometimes you don't succeed the first time. There's always a bright side, even if I don't see it right now. I made a mistake, but I am not a mistake. This is not the end of the world. The sun will come out tomorrow. I believe things will improve. I did it before. I can do it again. I erred. I made a mistake. Now I'm returning to my good patterns right away. That's okay. Eventually I'll improve. There'll be another chance. What will I learn for the next time? This is a huge question that we can ask for growth. What will I learn for the next time? I can't possibly control everything. Failure is an event, never a person. Oh boy, now I'm really going to learn something. Failure isn't final. Start again. Years from now, will anyone really care about this? So that's first step. Step number 2, we're going to write the 15 statements that you are most likely to remember. Okay? For the before, during, and after. So 5 of each. And when our behavior falls short of our goals, so we're going to look for 5 before, 5 during, and 5 after. These statements are going to be great to review and think about to helping us improve. So over the next few days, okay, we're going to practice this strategy with an event that has that flop potential of something that we're not going to potentially succeed at, right? And you're going to spend about 15 minutes mentally rehearsing what we just did right now, what we would think before such a situation, during the situation, and after the flop, right? And when we do something like that, we are here acknowledging, we are here looking at ourselves as humans that it's going to be natural for us to fail, and constantly working on it and taking essentially in the end the lessons learned from all of that.
All right. So that was a really powerful way of looking at how that the understanding that because we are not perfect, that we are going to have imperfections, we are going to flop, we are going to have these different challenges, right?
And to have that better understanding, let's take a look at, in terms of, excuse me, what we have explored in terms of the different and important ideas and skills regarding our third building block, factor 3 of that growth, right? So key points that we've learned here is taking a look at growing as an ongoing process. It is never fully completed, right? It's really important to understand that we are this ever blooming flower of growth, right? The growth process is a way of loving. So it is satisfying because it starts from the secure inner base of worth and love, our 2 building blocks that we have developed. So emotionally, the process says, I'm glad inside and I'm unafraid to be growing. This is becoming even better. And acknowledging that ascent is difficult, that we absolutely need to expect hard work. Growing is not competitive or comparative, right? What it is here, what growing is, right, is learning how to select our course and pace. It is not about being competitive. And as with weight and plans and exercise, it is why to pick up the pace that can be maintained throughout life by being manageable, reasonable, and realistic, right? Growing means elevating others along with ourselves. Growing results from applying principles and pleasures that elevate. Because growing is climbing that staircase, like we said, not arriving, you need not arrive to experience self-esteem. You need only know that in your heart, you are on track and you are moving ahead. And this idea here helps us get to the acquired skills that we have learned, wonderful skills that we have looked at in terms of the even though, nevertheless, right? Even though I'm not perfect, nevertheless, I'm a person of worth, I am learning, I am growing. We also looked at the loving, fearless, searching, and honest moral inventory by looking at our behaviors, our biology, our moral compass, etc., with the things that our strengths and our weaknesses and how to build on that. We also looked at how to actually schedule pleasant activities. We looked at activities that we once derived pleasure from and not necessarily much now, and how much we need to be doing more of that into our schedule. And of course, we spent some time looking at flop inoculation in terms of how that even if we flop and don't reach our goal, how we can look back and work on improving that goal for the next time. Now, how do we reinforce these skills moving forward? I'm going to ask you these questions to think about. All right. Just want to make sure.
Oh, yes, I did not put the next slide here. Sorry about that. There we are.
So my question is here, which one of these ideas had the most meaning to you?
I'd love to hear what you have to say. Which one of these had the most meaning for you? can see here people said many of these actually resonated quite a bit with you. So which one of these ideas and concepts had the most meaning to you? I really like the last one, the floppy inoculation and scheduling activities. Sometimes, like we said, the first thing to go are our most pleasurable activities or things that are good for our health. And I find with a lot of people, exercise is the first one to go because we need that time to put into um, whatever work that we are doing. However, if we can still plan in some small pleasurable activities that are wholesome and good for us, that can give us energy and derive more energy for us to work, right? So any of you have feedback in terms of which one of these stood out the most for you? Which ones would you like to apply? And which one would you be most likely to applying in your life? I would definitely put the last two. I would work a lot more on those. And I think the inventory is a really good one that gives you a lot of introspection. Definitely. All right. Wow, it's been 3 weeks already. And we have come to the final parts of our developing growth, love, and worth workshop, developing our sense of self-esteem. And I just can't believe how quick it went by.
I truly enjoyed giving these workshops, as this is the work that I've been doing for years now with students one-on-one. And I thought, why not put it into a group format? Now, because of the pandemic, we've been offering everything virtual, but we are moving back into our offices, especially with the one-on-one counseling. And in the future, we'll be doing these types of workshops in person. So to summarize, what we've done so far in this series is that we have to understand this basic concept of ourselves. Each of us has been created miraculously, just like we looked at in our love section, right? In so many different ways. It's important to quietly recognize and appreciate that so that you can grow with satisfaction and joy. Don't let mistakes of your lives define you, right? Don't let criticism of others, yourself, falling short of your goals, your past traumas, lack of money or status, or any other external factor define you. Each person is too precious and complex to be so narrowly defined. And what we have seen in our journey that we have explored so far is that we have explored a variety of self-esteem building skills, right? And as any other skill, you definitely need time to practice them, to be able to maintain them and implement them. Perhaps you can incorporate some of these skills into your life without much consciousness, right? Perhaps other skills will require you to deliberately put them in place so that you can develop them into a routine, which will then develop into a habit. And don't hesitate to go from time to time back to these skills to refresh them and see how you can apply them. Also talking to other people in order to see what they're doing, perhaps not to compare, but to learn from others as well to help you, right? And always remember, if life throws you that curveball, right, and sets your self-esteem back somewhat, always remember, again, to refer back to these workshops that we've done to help you rehearse the skills, right? And that you can apply them to improve that self-esteem. So always look at the skills also that had meaning for you, right? And if self-esteem can be built once, it absolutely can be built again. And like any other important health practice, self-esteem building and maintenance is an ongoing process, right? Let's repeat that one again. Like any other important health practice, self-esteem building and maintenance is an ongoing process. However, like any other useful habits, self-esteem skills, once acquired, become almost second nature and therefore becomes easier to apply. And it is so important to summarize and reinforce your most important skills, as well as to serve as a quick reminder, especially when you're going through difficult times, right? It's really important to review all of what we have learned to see how you can apply it daily into your lives so that If ever you flop with your self-esteem, you can always, always work on it to bring it back on track. Absolutely. Fully, 100% believe that, because we're always in that dynamic in flux. We are never in that constant place of just steadiness, right? We're always going up and down, up and down. That's how growth occurs. It is never a steady line. What we have learned over the last 3 weeks is looking at how to build that steady block of unconditional worth, how to build that steady block of unconditional worth in order for our growth to develop, so that our self-esteem can be in that healthy balance that we can grow and learn from. Thank you very much to all of you who had joined in this amazing, fun series. I really enjoyed doing this series, working on it, putting it together, and super happy to have had the opportunity to share it with you all. And it will be recorded right now, and it will be for your use afterwards as well. If you have any questions, absolutely now's the time to ask them. If you have any comments, what stood out for you, I'd love to hear that. And for those of you who'd like to email me, I shall type it right up here on the screen. Just give me a moment and I will put that up here for you. So there's 2 emails you can catch me at. So I'll just type it. There is my Carleton email. So for those of you who are Carleton students, this is the email you can catch me. And for those of you who are not Carleton students, you can catch me at this other email. Just give me a second. I'm just going to type that up and put that up on the screen for you to see. Sorry, it didn't save. So just 1 second. Let me write that out again. So it's Berak dot Hussain at Carleton. Always seems to be some technical issues at the end of our presentations. Okay, so at carleton.ca. And the other one is the Muslim Counselor. This is for people who are watching outside of Carleton, that you can also email me at this email. So just 1 moment. There we go. So I'm going to put that right up on the screen. There we go. So Berak.Hussain at carleton.ca for Carleton student staff. And for those of you who are outside of Carleton, you can pop me an email at themuslimcounselor@gmail.com. Thank you very much. I hope that you have a blessed day and the rest of the week. And starting next week, we'll be starting a new series on stress management. The first of the series will be So the first of the series that we will be doing will be on how to manage your stress with a beautiful mindful meditation. The second workshop the week after will be the same time and day, Thursdays at 2:30. We'll be looking at burning out and what that means and how to cope with burnout. And finally, right before our exam time, we'll be having workshops on how to manage your stress for exams and how to prepare for exams. Again, thank you very much for all of those who have been engaged in this and sharing this. And please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. For Carleton students, if you'd like to book an appointment with me, just call the main office at 613-520-6674. And that way you can talk with myself or any other of the counselors. So somebody's mentioning that the writing is too small. So I will repeat it again. It's berak.hussain at carleton.ca for Carleton staff and students. And outside of that, it is the Muslim Counselor, THEMuslimCounselor@gmail.com. So it should be big on the screen. Let me try and make it bigger before we head out. I'm going to try. I'm not sure if I can. Is that clear there? Is that big? I'm trying to find the biggest one here. I think it's that one. There we go. So there's the contact information if you'd like to. There we go. All right, great. Thank you very much. Don't hesitate to reach out.
May you be blessed, and we'll see you back again next week with the next round of workshops that we have on stress management as we head into the mid of the semester after the reading break, with our midterms heading into final. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day.